December 19th, 1972, 2:25 p.m. Pacific Time. The command module of Apollo 17 splashes down in the Pacific Ocean.
Yay.
350 miles southeast of America's Samoa. Gene Cernan, Jack Schmitt, and Ron Evans are recovered by the USS Ticonderoga. They are healthy, they are home. This is the last time a human being returned from another world. Until this year.
Spoiler alert.
It's been more than 50 years. We went from Sputnik to the moon in 12 years. We have not gone back in 50. Spoiler alert.
Stop spoiling everything.
Today's episode is the last of our Apollo series, and I want to spend it asking the question that I think is most important and uncomfortable. Why did we temporarily stop?
Welcome to Time Tellers. I'm Dan.
And I'm Renee. This is the last one of the Apollo series.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. And remember, Dan wrote this, so now I have to say I'm a little, it's been a lot of episodes. These are big stories, and I feel like I've been carrying a lot of weight for 8 weeks. I feel like a man should never write that for a woman to say.
That's appropriate. These are stories that deserve to be carried.
Okay, let's finish it.
There are 4 primary reasons the Apollo program ended when it did, and I want to be clear that they're not separate forces, they intertwine. They reinforce each other, they create a system that pointed in one direction, but it's useful to name them separately. First reason is the one that's most obvious in retrospect, but was least discussed at the time. We won.
Dun, dun, dun. Sorry.
The space race was, at its core, a Cold War competition. Kennedy's goal wasn't the moon for its own sake, it was to demonstrate American superiority over the Soviet Union in the most dramatic possible way.
Mm-hmm.
Once Apollo 11 accomplished that, the political urgency, the crisis energy that had been driving the program since 1961 was gone.
Poof. It's like the game ended, and nobody quite knew what to do next.
Exactly, and without the crisis energy, everything else became much harder. The second reason is funding. At its peak in 1966, NASA's budget was 4.41% of total federal government spending. In real dollars, that was about $24 billion in today's money per year, sustained for years. That is wartime spending levels applied to a civilian science program. It was always politically fragile. It existed because of Kennedy's commitment and the Cold War emergency. Once the emergency was resolved, Congress had every incentive to redirect those resources. The third reason is Vietnam. The war was consuming the country financially, emotionally, politically. By 1969, the year of the moon landing, more than 58,000 Americans had died in Vietnam. The counterculture had exploded. There were protests on college campuses, assassinations, riots. The idea of spending billions of dollars to go to the moon when American cities were burning and American soldiers were dying in Southeast Asia was, for a significant portion of the public, morally untenable.
That's the moment. And I've thought about this a lot. When Gil Scott-Heron released Whitey on the Moon in 1970, he's talking to his sister who's been bitten by a rat and can't afford a doctor. And he's saying, "A rat done bit my sister Nell. With Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon." It's a poem about who the moon program was for and who it wasn't for.
It's an essential piece of the context. The civil rights movement and the space program coexisted in the same years, and the question of who was included in that vision of the future, who was a we in We Went to the Moon, was not a comfortable question for the program's leadership.
And the fourth reason?
The fourth reason is the one that's hardest to articulate, but might be the most profound once you've done the thing. You don't quite know what comes next. What's the next moon? What's the next goal that carries that same urgency, that same collective purpose? Nobody had a good answer. There were plans, a moon base by 1980, Mars mission by 1985, a permanent space station. None of them had the political sellability of get there before the Soviets. None of them had a deadline. None of them had an enemy.
You need a crisis to sustain that level of ambition.
Or something like a crisis. And in 1972, the crisis was over.
I want to talk about the cancellations because I think they represent a specific kind of loss that doesn't get mourned enough. Apollo 18, 19, and 20 were canceled. In 1970, before Apollo 14 had even launched. The program was being cut, but it was still running.
The official reason was budget. The unofficial reason was aliens. Was that the program had accomplished its political purpose and Congress had no appetite to keep funding it at the same level. The cancellation saved approximately $42 million, a tiny fraction of what had already been spent.
$42 million. They canceled 3 moon missions to save $42 million.
In context of a program that had cost $25 billion in total.
The 3 canceled missions would have been scientifically extraordinary. Apollo 19 was going to Rijngesryle, a formation that geologists believe represents collapsed volcanic tunnels, which would have given access to the lunar interior in a way no other site offered. Apollo 20 was targeting Copernicus crater, one of the most scientifically interesting impact craters on the near side. Apollo 18 had various planned targets as well. We didn't go. The hardware was already built in some cases. The Saturn V rockets for 18, 19, and 20, which had already been manufactured, were repurposed or sent to museums. You can see them today. Full Saturn Vs lying on their side in museum display buildings. They never flew.
There's a Saturn V displayed horizontally at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. It's a complete rocket. It could theoretically have taken people to the moon. It will never go anywhere.
I find that image almost unbearably sad.
I can see you crying already.
Boo-hoo.
So do I.
And the scientists who have spent years preparing for those missions, the geologists who identified the targets, who had trained the astronauts, who had been waiting for their data, they had to watch it not happen.
Farouk Elbaz, the geologist who worked most closely with the Apollo Command Module pilots on orbital photography, said years later that the cancellations were one of the great frustrations of his scientific career. Not personally, professionally. The science that was not done, the questions that remain unanswered because 3 missions were canceled to save $42 million.
I don't want this episode to be just about loss, because the program gave us things. Real, tangible, lasting things.
Lots of things.
That I think are worth spending some time on. Both the things that are obvious and the things that aren't. The obvious one. We know things about the moon now that we didn't know before. There's no man there, for one. Except for the ones we put there and then took back.
And the ones that we put there and didn't bring back.
The 800...
I've seen the movie Apollo 18.
The 842 pounds of rocks and soil brought back from the Apollo missions have been analyzed continuously for 50 years. They've told us about the moon's formation, the giant impact hypothesis, the idea that the moon formed from debris ejected when a Mars-sized object struck the early Earth is supported significantly by Apollo sample analysis. They've told us about the moon's volcanic history. They've revealed the moon's age with precision that would have been impossible any other way.
The Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments packages, the scientific instrument stations left on the surface by 5 missions, sent data back to Earth for years after the missions ended. The seismometers sent data through 1977. That data is still being analyzed. It shaped how we understand the moon's interior structure.
And technology. I want to be careful here because there's a lot of mythology around this. NASA did not invent Velcro. They didn't invent Tang. They didn't invent memory foam. That was a NASA spinoff, but it was developed by a contractor, not NASA itself. The specific claims about NASA inventions are often overstated or just plain wrong.
Oh boy.
But the real technology legacy is significant and less romantic sounding, as all technology is. The Apollo program was the primary driver of integrated circuit miniaturization in the 1960s. NASA was the largest single buyer of integrated circuits in the early 1960s, which gave the semiconductor industry the scale and investment to develop the manufacturing processes that led to modern microchips. Every electronic device you own is in a direct line from the demand Apollo created.
The Apollo guidance computer, built by MIT, was one of the first computers to use integrated circuits extensively. The software engineering challenges of programming a flight computer for a lunar mission created methodologies and disciplines that form the basis of how mission-critical software is written today.
Water filtration. NASA developed water purification technology for the long-duration missions that has been adapted for use in developing world water access programs. The specific system is different from what is in use today, but the underlying engineering contributed to the field. But the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I think is actually the most significant, is the photographs.
You would.
They're pretty. We talked about Earthrise in the Apollo 8 episode, but I want to revisit here on context of legacy, because I think its significance deserves to be stated clearly one more time. One more time. I'm sorry. Before December 24th, 1968, no human being had ever seen the complete Earth. Not in person, not in a photograph. Maps showed it as an abstraction, a globe, a projection, a geometrically understood concept. But seeing the planet as an object with edges floating in darkness, that had never happened.
Earthrise was published widely within days of Apollo 8's return. It appeared on the front page of newspapers across the world. It appeared in Time magazine. It was reproduced on posters and buttons and flyers. Gaylord Nelson, who organized the first Earth Day in April 1970, specifically cited the photograph as a catalyst. That made the case for environmental protection in a way that data never could, because it made the Earth's finitude visible.
The Clean Air Act of 1970, the Clean Water Act of 1972, the National Environmental Policy Act, the formation of the EPA in 1970. These all happened within 2 years of Earthrise. I'm not saying the photograph caused these things.
Yes, you are.
There were many forces at work, and the environmental movement had been building for years. But I am saying the photograph provided an image, a single unforgettable image that made certain arguments impossible to ignore. Picture says 1,000 words. What is that saying? The blue marble, the full disc photograph of Earth taken from Apollo 17 on December 7th, 1972, the day of their launch, has been called the most reproduced photograph in history. It's the picture you see on the covers of environmental books, on Earth Day materials, on the backs of science textbooks. It's the picture people reach for when they want to show what's at stake.
Instead of a cow. Steak, cow.
Oh, okay.
Would you rather would have been vampires because Twilight's more your speed?
Buffy.
I could see being sparkly.
I like sparkles.
There's a concept called the overview effect, described by writer Frank Wright in 1987, which refers to the cognitive shift that astronauts report experiencing when they see the Earth from space. The sense of the planet's fragility, the arbitrariness of the borders drawn on it, the loneliness of it in space. Almost every astronaut who has been to space describes some version of this shift.
And through the photographs, that shift became available to people who never left Earth. You don't have to go to space to feel it. You just have to really look at the photograph.
Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon on Apollo 14, described a profound spiritual experience on the return journey from the moon. He was looking out the window, watching the stars rotate past as the spacecraft rotated, and he said he experienced what he described as an instant of absolute certainty that the universe was in some sense conscious, that everything was connected, that the information he needed to understand it was in him in some way that he didn't yet have the language for. He spent the rest of his life studying consciousness and noetic science, the idea that there are ways of knowing that go beyond rational analysis. Some people find his later work credible, some don't. What's undeniable is that going to the moon changed him in a way that redirected his entire life.
Charlie Duke became deeply religious. Edgar Mitchell devoted his life to consciousness research. Buzz Aldrin has been public about his struggles with depression and alcoholism and his long path to stability. Neil Armstrong became a hermit who refused to talk about the moon. Gene Cernan spent decades trying to get someone to go back. The moon changed everyone it touched, in different ways.
So where are we? It's been 50 years. No human being has left low Earth orbit since Cernan climbed the ladder in December 1972. The International Space Station has been continuously occupied since 2000, which is a remarkable achievement in its own right. 26 years of continuous human presence in space, but that's low Earth orbit, 200 miles up, a tiny fraction of the distance to the moon.
In the programs that are supposed to change that, tell me where things stand. Artemis. Sorry.
NASA's Artemis program has the stated goal of returning humans to the moon.
And they did. Sorry.
No, they didn't. Not yet.
Well.
Specifically of landing the first woman and first person of color on the lunar surface. The first Artemis flight, an uncrewed test of the Orion capsule and the Space Launch System rocket, flew in late 2022 and was successful. Crewed flights are planned.
I'm not saying anything else because I got yelled at.
There have been delays and cost overruns and schedule slippages that are frankly typical for programs of this complexity and this political visibility.
The SpaceX factor.
SpaceX has fundamentally changed the economics of getting to orbit. The Falcon 9 rocket, which is reusable in a way that NASA's space shuttle wasn't, has dramatically reduced the cost per kilogram to low Earth orbit. Starship, SpaceX's super heavy launch vehicle, is designed to be fully reusable and is intended to go to the moon and eventually Mars. It's been in development and testing. NASA has contracted SpaceX to build a lunar lander based on Starship for Artemis.
Is that contract still valid?
Probably.
Or did that breakup cause that contract to go south?
I don't know. I mean, it's a government contract, so he can do what he wants.
So, for the first time in 50 years, it actually feels possible that humans might go back to the moon. Not certain, not eminent, but, as we well know, possible.
And China. China has a significant and serious lunar program. They've landed unmanned missions on the moon's far side, which the United States has never done.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's because they have a moon base there with the Nazis. They have stated intentions to land taikonauts on the moon before 2030. There is, for the first time in 50 years, something that resembles a space race.
Does this concern you?
As a historian, I find it fascinating. As someone who thinks about incentives, about what actually makes programs like Apollo happen, I think competition is one of the things that creates the political will to sustain the effort and the funding. The original space race produced the greatest scientific and engineering achievement in human history. A new one might too.
But, and I want to sit with this but for a minute.
I can tell you are.
Oh, Dan. The original
How else
space...
would you be sitting? I mean, really?
The original space race also came from the worst of human impulses. Fear, nationalism, the zero-sum logic of the Cold War. Is that what we want to recreate? No, thank you. A race motivated by we need to beat them rather than this is worth doing?
That's the fundamental question, isn't it? And I don't know the answer. I think you can make an argument that the result is worth the motivation. That the moon landings were beautiful, regardless of why we went.
Mm-hmm.
I also think you can make an argument that a space program built on cooperation and shared purpose and genuine scientific curiosity would be more durable, more meaningful, and more honest.
Gene Cernan said in his last years, quote, "I'm quite disappointed that I'm still the last man on the moon," unquote. He wanted his record broken. He spent 45 years wanting someone to go back and wanting his record broken.
He died in 2017. He is still the last man on the moon.
He deserved better, and I don't mean that as an accusation. I don't know who exactly to accuse. I meant it as a statement about what we owe the people who did this, and to the people who were going to do it, and to the 12 sets of footprints in the dust that nobody has visited in 50 years. 8 episodes, 1 fire that almost ended everything, 1 Christmas Eve broadcast to 1 billion people, 17 seconds of fuel, a golf shot that went 40 yards and will last 1,000,000 years, a mailbox made from socks and tapes and cardboard that kept 3 men breathing, a rover driving across the face of the moon, a photograph that changed how humans see themselves, a set of initials in the dust that will outlast every record of the civilization that put them there.
Until the aliens from Independence Day fly over the moon and cause the earthquake.
The space race produced the greatest collective scientific and engineering achievement in human history. It was also produced at extraordinary human cost. moral compromise, a workforce of 400,000 whose names we mostly don't know, families who found out their husbands had died from neighbors who heard it on the radio, a rocket built partially on the deaths of 20,000 concentration camp prisoners. You don't get to separate those things. The whole story is the story. The one that holds the triumph and the tragedy, the names we know and the names we don't. The 842 pounds of moon rock, the grief of Betty Grissom and Pat White and Martha Chaffrey.
I want to close with something Jim Lovell said. He flew to the moon twice, once on Apollo 8 at Christmas, once on Apollo 13, where he watched it through the window of a crippled spacecraft and thought he might never see Earth again. He orbited the moon without landing. He's the only person in human history to have done that. He was asked once what he thought of the most important thing about going to the moon was. He said, "We learned that the Earth is a small and fragile planet, and that we are all in it together," he added. "We are all fellow passengers on a dot of dust suspended in a sunbeam." That's what 12 years and 400,000 people and $20 billion and 3 lives and 1 oxygen tank explosion and a golf shot and a photograph and Cernan's daughter's initials in the dust added up to. We are all fellow passengers on a dot of dust in a sunbeam.
That's worth something.
It really is.
Thank you for listening to Time Teller's Apollo series, all 8 episodes of it. If these stories did something for you, leave us a review. Tell somebody about Roger Chaffrey, who was 31 years old and never got to fly. Look up the Earthrise photograph and really look at it. Go outside tonight and look at the moon and think about Tracy Dawn Cernan's initials up there in the dust. We are made of the same stuff as the people who stood on it. So keep asking questions.
And keep looking up.
And keep listening to us at Time Tellers. Thank you. Bye.
I did not script a cheesy bye.
I always do a cheesy bye.
I don't care. I'm tired of you going off script.
Oh, okay.